Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. Democratic candidate Joe Biden has taken the lead in Pennsylvania with 95% of votes counted. If he wins Pennsylvania, he wins the presidency. Biden is already leading President Donald Trump in Georgia with 99% of votes counted. However, Trump has once again complained of electoral fraud without offering evidence. In Afghanistan, the Taliban have rejected the government's claim of retaking control of Arghandab district of Kandahar. They were responding to the Afghan army chief's remarks that 200 Taliban fighters were killed in the operation. In a tweet, a spokesman for the Taliban said no casualties were reported. In occupied Kashmir, Indian forces have martyred 3 people during a military raid in the Pulwama district. This comes as Kashmiris across the world are observing the Jammu Martyrs' Day to hail the sacrifices of Muslims in the November 1947 massacre. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now the news in detail. In the United States, Democratic candidate Joe Biden has taken the lead in Pennsylvania with 95% of votes counted. If he wins Pennsylvania, he wins the presidency. Biden is already leading President Donald Trump in Georgia with 99% of votes counted. However, Trump has once again complained of electoral fraud without offering evidence. More in this report.
Vote counting continues in the key states of Nevada, Arizona, and North Carolina, where a winner is yet to emerge. Though Joe Biden has a razor-thin lead in Nevada and Arizona, President Donald Trump is in no mood to concede to his rival. Speaking with reporters at the White House, Trump cast doubts on the democratic process by once again making unsubstantiated claims of electoral fraud.
We think we will win the election very easily. We think there's going to be a lot of litigation because we have so much evidence, so much proof, and it's going to end up perhaps at the highest court in the land. We'll see. But we think there'll be a lot of litigation because we can't have an election stolen like this.
His Democratic rival Joe Biden has appealed for calm and again expressed confidence he would be declared the winner. The overall turnout is projected to be the highest in 120 years at 66.9% due to a surge in mail voting. And the final result could take days to come.
Indian forces have martyred 3 more youths during a military raid in Pulwama district. This comes as Kashmiris across the world are observing the Jammu Martyrs' Day to hail the sacrifices of Muslims in November 1947 massacre.
Hundreds of thousands of Kashmiris were massacred by the forces of Maharaja Hari Singh and Hindu extremists in Jammu while they were migrating to Pakistan in the first week of November 1947. Hundreds of Muslim women were raped and molested. The all-parties Hurriyat conference termed the tragedy as the worst kind of genocide in human history. Hurriyat leaders say the fascist Indian government wants to repeat the same sad story in occupied Kashmir. They also organized a prayer meeting to mark the day while renewing the pledge to thwart the Indian oppression. Azad Kashmir's president Sardar Masood Khan says the murderous campaign of Hindu extremists against Muslims hasn't stopped yet.
We mark November the 6th, 1947 as the darkest day in the history of Jammu and Kashmir. On that day, and in the months of October and November 1947, the Dogra Army, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, and the Indian National Army massacred 237,000 Muslims. This was the first genocide after the Second World War on such a massive scale. From November the 4th to November the 6th, Muslim population of Jammu, Kathua, Udhampur and Riyasi were viciously targeted and attacked. Tens of thousands of people were duped into believing that they were being transported to Pakistan but near Samba, at the Jammu-Sialkot road, they were all butchered mercilessly.
The region has been under a strict curfew since India revoked its autonomy in August last year. 23 people have been martyred by the occupation forces in October alone.
Azerbaijan says the Armenian Air Force has once again targeted civilian areas as the fighting over the Nagorno-Karabakh region rages. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said its military dealt heavy damage to Armenian troops in response. Earlier, President Ilham Aliyev said his troops advanced to positions just below the city of Shusha. The city is considered as a strategic fortress and a key to get control over the disputed region. Nearly 1,200 troops have been killed since the clashes broke out in September. Russia says media reports about President Vladimir Putin's resignation due to health conditions are false. In a statement, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the president is in excellent health. Earlier, a British tabloid reported that Putin was planning to quit next year after possible symptoms of Parkinson's disease. The report came after Moscow's lower house proposed a law giving ex-Russian presidents immunity from criminal prosecution. The bill will become law if the lower house gives votes to approve it. Putin was first elected as Russia's president in 2000 and has served longer than any politician since the early 1950s. Turkey has criticized Israel's move to demolish more than 70 Palestinian homes in the occupied Jordan Valley. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said Israel's unlawful and inhuman acts are jeopardizing chances for peace.
As the world keenly watches the presidential election in the United States, its all-weather friend continues to build its hegemony in the occupied West Bank. Turkey's foreign ministry says Israel has demolished 690 structures across the West Bank so far this year. This has led to the displacement of some 850 Palestinians in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. Last month, Israel approved the construction of more than 2,000 settler homes in the West Bank. In a bid to double down on its plans, Israel stopped issuing visas to United Nations human rights workers in Palestine. Israeli settlements are deemed as illegal under the international law. The international community and the United Nations have repeatedly called on Israel to put an end to its expansionist policies.
And now moving on to Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed vows to continue a military offensive in the northern state of Tigray amid concerns it could descend into civil conflict. In a televised address, Abiy said the offensive follows a deadly attack on a military camp. Tensions between the state and the federal government have risen in recent months. The Tigrayan president said his region is in a state of war. The state's governing party was once at the center of power in Ethiopia. But since Abiy became prime minister in 2018, it has been increasingly marginalized. The U.S. has reported record COVID-19 daily cases of over 118,000 for the second consecutive day, pushing the tally past 9.6 million. Globally, the number of deaths has exceeded 1.2 million, with over 48.6 million cases. More in the following report.
With over 10 months into the COVID-19, hopes for the pandemic ending anytime soon are becoming dimmer. 17 of the United States have reported record one-day increases in new infections. In addition to the rising coronavirus cases, hospitalizations of COVID-19 patients rose for the 11th consecutive day to over 52,000. About the economic situation in the country, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell believes it will need further stimulus to survive.
Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have taken forceful actions to provide relief and stability, to ensure that the recovery will be as strong as possible, and to limit lasting damage to the economy. Today, my colleagues on the Federal Open Market Committee and I reaffirmed our commitment to support the economy in this challenging time.
The second wave of the outbreak continues to batter Europe. Greece has reported record-high daily cases and deaths, while Denmark is set to impose tougher lockdown measures after discovering a mutated coronavirus strand in the country's northern parts. In Spain, the healthcare system is acutely strained as it becomes the fourth European country to surpass the 38,000 death toll. Matters in Belgium and Poland are no different, with hospitals set to run out of ICU beds really soon as cases spike.
It's not that the hospital do not want to take patients. They have nowhere to put them. They do not have beds at ward. A patient suspected of having been infected could be isolated from those who have not been infected.
Over in Asia, India has registered 670 deaths overnight, increasing the tally to nearly 125,000, with more than 8.4 million cases. Meanwhile, China has barred entry of non-Chinese travelers from Britain, France, Belgium, the Philippines, and India.
Now moving on to Pakistan has reported 30 deaths from COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. The health ministry says 1,376 people have tested positive for the virus overnight. The ministry said the death toll in Pakistan has reached nearly 7,000. It said the number of active cases in the country is over 16,000. More than 317,000 patients have recovered so far across the country. It said 830 patients remain critical. And now it's time to have a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam says whoever wins the U.S. presidential election must end interference in her city's internal affairs. Speaking to the media in Beijing, she called the U.S. sanctions imposed on Hong Kong officials, including herself, unacceptable. Earlier, Lam held meetings with China's central government officials to discuss anti-coronavirus efforts. She said the government has welcomed her proposals regarding a coronavirus relief package. The Hong Kong leader is on a 3-day trip to Beijing. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has been sworn in for a second term. Ardern and her cabinet took oaths of their offices during a ceremony at Wellington's Government House. Ardern won 50% of vote in October's general elections, giving her 65 of 120 seats in the parliament. Her cabinet includes 8 women. Ardern says her government will prioritize fight against COVID-19 and rebuilding the economy. Meanwhile, New Zealanders have voted in referendums on recreational marijuana use and euthanasia. Final results from the Electoral Commission showed a slim 50.7% majority voted against cannabis use, whereas nearly 2/3 backed allowing euthanasia. In Libya, at least 14 unidentified dead bodies have been unearthed in mass graves discovered in Tarhuna city near capital Tripoli. Authorities say 112 bodies have been unearthed from mass graves since June. The Libya's internationally recognized government and Eastern forces have repeatedly accused each other of committing mass killings. The two sides had been engaged in a deadly armed conflict for more than a year in and around Tripoli. In Central America, more than 70 people have died as Hurricane Eta unleashed torrential rains and catastrophic flooding in the region. Authorities say the storm has forced tens of thousands of people to leave their homes for shelters, while hundreds are stranded on rooftops or cut off by floods. The storm hit Nicaragua as mighty Category 4 hurricane on Tuesday. Eta has since been downgraded to a tropical storm. It is expected to head towards Cuba and possibly the Gulf of Mexico by early next week. The United Nations and the World Health Organizations have called for an emergency action to avert major measles and polio epidemics. The two organizations say COVID-19 has further exacerbated their vaccination coverage gaps. A joint statement said millions of vulnerable children are at a heightened risk of preventable diseases. It warned a failure to eradicate polio will lead to the global resurgence of the disease. The statement said as many as 200,000 new cases will emerge annually within 10 years. Approximately $655 million are needed to address the dangerous immunity gaps. An Australian artist turned grain loss into his canvas while he painted a diviner-inspired mural on it. A larger-than-life mural has brought an artistic flourish to the once barren landscape. More in the report.
In some parts of Australia, proponents believe they can find water underground by using rods. So when Finton McGee was asked to paint a trio of silos in a small rural town of Baraba, he decided against the archetypical image of sheep and cattle and drew a water divner. During a research trip to the town, the artist saw a divner working with bore drillers amid the persistent dry conditions.
There's kind of an ongoing drought in New England, in that region. At that time anyway, and I thought that the bore drilling was kind of something interesting and kind of related to the drought, and a lot of my work deals with climate change and the environment, so that was something I thought could be quite interesting.
The large size has one great advantage over other forms of street art. It is almost impossible for passerbyers not to look. A common observation by onlookers is the man in the painting resembles Prince Harry.
probably make a postcard and send it to the Poms and say, hey, Harry's been to Australia. They took his picture and put him on a silo. Yeah. So there you go. First thing my wife said, hey, Harry's been here. How do you know? Look on the silo. So there we go.
While broadly considered as street art, the sheer size of large-scale murals make them a phenomena of their own. McGee says he used a cherry picker to access his canvas and used about 100 liters of paint to complete the mural in 23 days.
A Rubiks Cube artist has created a 6,000-piece mosaic within 16 hours, the largest ever made in this time. More in the following report.
The Rubiks Cube was invented in 1974 by Erno Rubik, who then called it the Magic Cube. In 1980, the Ideal Toy Company changed its name and began to distribute the newly renamed Rubiks Cube that is sold around the world today. Giovanni Contardi created a special artwork to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Logic Puzzle and the finals of the Red Bull Rubik's Cube World Cup, both on Saturday. Contardi took 15 hours, 49 minutes and 32 seconds to complete the artwork, beating his 24-hour target.
So I just finished and it took me about 16 hours. The hardest part was definitely staying focused for this whole time and of course enduring the pain on my legs, but I'm happy to be done.
The mosaic, made of using the artist's own cubes, depicts the Greek god Atlas holding a giant Rubik's Cube. The Italian artist typically creates portraits and has completed works of celebrities such as Rihanna and Will Smith. The first Rubik's Cube portrait that Contardi sold to singer Amy Winehouse was for about $5,000.
This mosaic is quite special for different reasons. First, it's not a portrait, which is something that I usually do with Rubik's Cubes. And second, it's a 6,111 Rubik's Cube mosaic, which is the biggest one ever done in less than 24 hours.
On the puzzle's 40th anniversary on November 7th, international speed cubers will compete online. Last year's championship took place in Russia and was won by Max Park from America, who beat two-time world champion Australia's Felix Zemdegs.
And now moving on to the business stories, Japanese auto giant Toyota Motor has doubled its full-year operating prediction amid a rebound in sales in China. The company said it expects a profit of $12.6 billion for the year through March 2021. This will be a significant jump from the previous year's $4.7 billion profit. Toyota said online sales and other initiatives helped the company to continue building relationships with its clientele. The auto giant said its sales recovery in COVID-19 crisis outpaced the market by more than 3%. Toyota reported 4% operating loss in profit in the current year due to the pandemic. The Wall Street stocks have declined as traders looked for clarity around the U.S. presidential election results. The market losses were abridged by better than expected U.S. unemployment data. Nasdaq Composite traded over 1% lower, while the indices of S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrial Average also traded down. Meanwhile, oil prices slumped over rise in coronavirus cases and delay in U.S. election results. European markets are trading mixed as investors await the outcome of the U.S. election. Rising coronavirus cases and new restrictions across the continent have also got investors worried. The pan-European stock 600 fluctuated either side of the flat line. London's FTSE is hovering around the flat line, while Frankfurt's DAX has shed marginally. Paris CAC 40 has edged down. The FTSE MIB in Italy has also dropped fractionally. Earlier, most Asian markets traded mixed, with all bourses edging up slightly, with the exception of mainland Chinese shares.